and we want to get some innovative approaches from you. And the first is Sabina on the right of mine, and try to do it in 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you to both of the co-chairs and to Progressive Economy and the S&D Group for commissioning the European Just Jobs Index and inviting myself and my colleagues here to present it today. Just want to give you some quick context. I represent here today the Just Jobs Network, which is a newly autonomous organization. We used to be part of the Center for American Progress, but we are now an independent organization. We work with partner organizations throughout the world, and Fafo is one of our valued partners. The Just Jobs Network's goal is to conduct innovative research to find evidence-based solutions to what I think is one of the most pressing challenges today, which is how do you create more and better jobs? What do we mean by more and better jobs? Well, in the context of Just Jobs, it is very much along the lines of the ILO's decent work agenda to include, appropriate remuneration, rights at work, social protections, social dialogue. But what I think is even more important in today's economy is this idea of economic mobility. So the Just Jobs Network does not view a good job, a just job, as a static snapshot in time with all of these four components. We also look at what kind of mobility people have. Are they actually able to improve their prospects? So with that context, I just want to make three very quick points. First, we've heard a lot in the last day and a half about how progressives want to change the economic paradigm and change the dialogue. And here, I think even among progressives, one of the pervasive attitudes is that if you generate economic growth, the jobs will come. But we heard this morning that we are seeing jobless growth. And I think the real issue is that we need to generate jobs, and we need to generate an employment-based growth strategy. The composition of growth matters. The politics and policies to generate growth matters, and jobs need to be at the core of a growth strategy. Jobs need to drive growth, and not us waiting for growth to drive jobs. That is my first point. My second point, which is related, is this idea of a shortage of aggregate demand. We know that there is weak demand in Europe. The IMF projects that it is 0.8% of GDP in 2014. But central to promoting aggregate demand is, again, surprise, surprise, this idea of good jobs. Good jobs that actually provide people with the ability to have a decent standard of living and spend money. So central to creating aggregate demand and is generating domestic wage-driven demand. And it's equally central to promoting export demand. So in other countries, if people have good jobs and can raise their living standards, that creates new markets for products and services from Europe. So both domestic demand and export demand are contingent on just jobs. My last point before I hand it over to my colleagues is relating all of what I've just said to the Just Jobs Index. Just Jobs Index is designed as a tool to change the way we talk about economics today, to change this economic paradigm, to put jobs at the heart of our growth strategies. The Just Jobs Index allows us to examine what comprises a good job. What are the different factors that make a good job? And what are the factors that affect a country's performance in terms of creating more and better jobs for its citizens? The Just Jobs Network uses or proposes the Just Jobs Index as a tool to assess how austerity or cuts in Social Security, for example, affect both the quality and the quantity of jobs. So with that, I will just end by saying that, every index that has been produced has been criticized for methodology for one reason or another, and we look forward to a lively debate on the technicalities of the index. But the challenge here, and the challenge to European policymakers, is what do you do with that index? How are you going to take this information and use it to create more and better jobs, to create just jobs for your economies, to generate aggregate demand, and to come up with an employment-based growth strategy. So that is the challenge for you, and we look forward to working with you on that. And with that, I hand it over to my colleagues from Fafo.
Thank you very much, Sabina. And I will not say very much about Fafo, just the fact that what we're doing is basically empirical research around the world in order to enable policymakers and the general public to take informed decisions. Now, Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy described a race of beings that this builds a big computer, asks it for the meaning of life and everything, and waits 1 billion years and come up with result 42. Now the question is, what do you do then? Well, you basically find out why it was 42. And in our case, it's actually 49. But what we're interested here is, or what we've done is basically to construct index based on the data we have and data that are available, and it shows several things. It shows that we don't really know we don't have the data for good jobs in Europe. We did this before for the whole goal, and that's even worse. There's way too little data. So we have to stick with what we have, and we have to ask all of you to inform policymakers that, well, in order to actually describe what is going on, we will have to do a better job on the data. The other thing is, well, we can discuss a long time, as Sabina just said, what should go into this index. And I hope this will raise the awareness that we have to sort of specify what we are talking about. That is one of the ideas with this. But that being said, and we have a lot more to say, I will leave the floor to the big computer, that is Tewodros, that constructed did actual work constructing the index together with Kristin Jesnet and Wolfgang Scham.
Great, thank you very much, Jon and Sabina, for the introduction about the index and the network at Fafo. Basically, the Just Job Index is conceptually anchored with that the starting point for the Just Job Index is not born out of nowhere. Essentially, it's anchored with ILO's Decent Work Agenda, which has 4 different components that we have somehow, especially to be able to address the issue of inequality and social mobility, we have conceptually organized the Just Jobs Index to be anchored with 5 dimensions. These are social security, rights at work, equality of treatment and opportunities, employment, and social dialogue. And the employment dimension is also further subdivided into 3 dimensions: employment opportunities, income security, and employment security. So the idea is to gather as much data as possible that conceptualizes and operationalizes each of these dimensions that we put up here, and compose and construct the composite index. So this, I'm not going to go into the technicalities of how we have constructed, what kind of formulas we use, and so on. We have the report that's also in the compendium we have. But in a nutshell, the sort of steps that we have followed are 5 different steps. The first one is selection of indicators and data collection, we have covered the period from 2000 to 2012, because the main data collection exercise was done in 2013, so the data for 2013 was not ready by then, so we focused on up until 2012. Once we have the indicators, we have actually constructed indicators, more than 100 indicators, and essentially data is not necessarily available on all these indicators for all these years, for all these countries. So what we end up with about 33 different indicators in each of these dimensions that I just showed up. And we have, once we constructed the index, we conduct what we call imputation of missing data. That's basically trying to fill up some of the data gaps that we have in the database. Once that's completed, we carried out what we call a normalization of the data because various indicators are measured in different ways. We need some sort of standardization about how they are measured so that they all point to the same direction that we would like to achieve. Finally, we have aggregation and construction of the index, which we use an additive index. And I just have to mention at this stage that we have provided each of these dimensions an equal weight. Basically, the idea is to keep it simple as a starting point and provide the possibilities of adjusting these weights so that each of the dimensions will have different weights. That sort of tools is currently under preparation that we will also release to the public. But in this index that I'm presenting today, it will be focused mainly on each of these dimensions having equal weights. And carried out sensitivity analysis. This is essentially when we introduce one indicator, another indicator, how does the composite index behaves to be able to assess its performance. Once that is carried out, we have come up with two versions of the index. What we call the EU 28 JGI, that essentially covers all the EU member states, and then EU 21, that covers only 21 countries. The EU 28 covers all of the countries in 3 dimensions, and the EU 21 covers the 5 dimensions. This is mainly dictated by data availability that Dewan has been referring to. So what are the results? On EU 28 JustJobs Index, what we find out is in 2012, the top 5 performers on the JustJobs Index are Luxembourg, Sweden, Estonia, Finland, and Denmark. And on bottom 5, we have Spain, Malta, Italy, Greece, and Romania. On average, the index is essentially declining over time, the 49 figures that you just showed from Dewan. So you can see actually one of the main findings on our index is over time you can see how the countries are progressing on the index of the Just Jobs. And what you see here, you can see Romania at the bottom, you have Luxembourg up there, and things are declining over time. The decline has started all the way from 2000 to 2012. The Just Jobs Index performance has been declining, which has been also preferred earlier. The onset of this decline started even just prior to the onset of the economic crisis in 2008. As you can see, just before 2008, there is a clear decline in the performance of Just Job Index. So this is one clear message that is actually jobs needs to be at the center of the policy agenda in terms of addressing it, because the nature of the problem is not just that has happened after the onset of the crisis, but also something that has started earlier than that. So having said this, let me also present the EU 21 Just Jobs Index. We have classified the countries based on their performances into 5 categories. We have Poland, Greece in the bottom. We have Finland, Denmark, and Sweden on the top. As you can see, there is a clear decline, clear marked differences on the categorization of these countries. You can see Poland and Greece in the bottom, Sweden and Finland, Denmark up there, and the rest of the countries in the middle. One of the things that we have explored in this is also which aspect of the Just Job Index component is actually deriving this decline. As we can see from here, there is a clear decline that's also observed in pretty much in the onset of the economic crisis. But the key issue that we see here, especially on the bottom 5 countries, these are Romania, Greece, Italy, Malta, and Spain, is that declining social security and declining or increasing inequality. So to summarize, the point is that the 2 key messages that we have or that we get out of this index is that Just Jobs has been declining. During the period we have covered, some countries are dropping faster than others. Decline worsened after 2008. And reductions on social security expenditures and increased inequality are the main reasons for the decline of Just Job Index.